Hi, I'm Jake from That Guy & Co, and I'm here to talk you through my game mechanic project for AINT254. This devlog will be covering the basics of how I went about generating my ideas for the game, how I went about executing them, and a few basic scripts that I included in the game. I decided to do a turn-based RPG mechanic using a top-down tile-based system, quite similar to more common RPGs on handheld systems such as Stellar Glow. The mechanic was greatly influenced by my love of RPGs, and I put a lot of effort into recreating those mechanics in this small environment. So the idea that I was going for was a system that had many different classes and many different character archetypes. You'd be able to assign each archetype to have different classes, different equipment that they'd be able to have, and different skills that they'd have depending on the class, and some base skills for each archetype. Now, I didn't manage to implement most of that, but what I did implement was individual classes of characters with skills for those classes, which I will get into later. As I said, this was influenced by RPGs that occur on the DS or PS Vita systems, general handheld systems. I was planning on designing this from the point of view of releasing it on a handheld system, but I haven't actually built it for the system yet because I'm still not very good at UI, and I don't think my UI is quite appropriate for a handheld system. So because this is an RPG as opposed to a real-time first-person shooter or third-person platformer, etc., it's expected that the game is going to run quite slowly. Like, the player will take some time to decide their turns, decide what to do. There'll be a small delay whenever the AI chooses a move to make it look as if there's some thinking element going into it and make the gameplay seem more realistic. Because of that, you can actually get away with more computationally expensive options within the code, such as raycasts quite frequently, different sorts of pathfinding algorithms being called frequently as well, are all quite easily gotten away with because of the nature of a turn-based RPG. So, starting off, we've got the scene. The way I built this up is so that the tiles on the bottom are dynamically generated around the object in the scene. So if I just give you an example, if we click start, you can see that the tiles have been filled in with red around the edge and grey tiles in the middle areas, and you can still see these areas where the lighting bake has sort of coloured them red. A small little indent where the other tiles have been generated on top of the plane that's below the map. So as you can see, these tiles are generated around the object in the scene and around colliders that they might have. So if I was to stop and move some of these objects around, say move you over here and move this barrel over here, then you can see that the tiles have updated so that these positions are no longer considered movable tiles, as you can see here. Click on something else. So this was quite simple to do. Essentially, I create a raycast from 5 different points on each area of the tile. So because I know the tile size in advance, I was able to use what would be considered God variables. I would be able to use real numbers in the code as opposed to using variables assigned to allow me to scale the tiles, etc., and for it still to work. This is a bit of a cheap way of doing it, and I really should have made it so that it could scale with each tile, but for the purposes of this game mechanic and showcasing it, that wasn't particularly necessary. So it generates a raycast in each corner of the tile and one in the center, which we will see if I go into scene view instantly and pause. And all of these black lines are the raycasts, and you can see it generates one in each corner and one in the middle. And if any of these hit an object that has been tagged with the environment tag and is on the environment layer, then it will cause that tile to no longer be considered a movable tile. So if we go back into gameplay, I'll just showcase this. So these yellow tiles are movable ones, and you can see that the tiles that have objects on top are not considered movable. And if we hover over them, they don't highlight, unlike the movable tiles. So, that out of the way. Another thing you might have noticed when I start is that I randomly place characters. So I decided to do this to create a bit more of a challenge and create a bit more of a unique experience each time the player starts the game. So by giving them random units and assigning them in random positions, it can end up with a lot faster paced combat by starting people right next to each other, as we can see here, and can also end up with a good array of units, such as having multiple mages, or in some cases having fewer of a certain unit and more of another. As we can see here, they've got 3 bear units, and they'd have to plan their tactics accordingly with what units they get. So this adds a bit of replayability to the game, and it makes it a lot more of a tactical decision on what turns you take, because you don't know from the point of view of individual players not knowing what the other team has. You wouldn't know if the other players got the same units as you. You wouldn't know if the other players got mages or got thieves, etc., which mages and thieves are snakes and wolves respectively. So adds a bit more depth to the game. So this is something that has been given feedback to me in the demo or die sessions that we've been doing, and is something that has been looked a bit down upon, because it does take away from people being able to plan ahead of time what tactics they'd use, and to create teams to counter what they think the enemy might be using. So I'm likely to change this in the future to a system in which the players get given a certain amount of tokens and have a certain amount of empty slots for characters at the beginning of each game, and they can choose different units to fill those slots, and obviously more powerful units will have a higher token cost. So they could have more mages, and they'd have less units overall because they've got more of the powerful units, reducing the amount of overall tokens they have. So by doing something like this, it will let people choose units that they think are fun to play, and will also allow me to put a bit more balance into the uniqueness of each unit, by making the ones that should be weaker, such as the wolves, who are a bit overpowered at the moment, actually weaker without affecting the randomly generated units and without causing people to lose because they got randomly given loads of wolves. So next on the agenda is the UI, and if we go into game, I will show you each individual part of the UI. So we're going to ignore the attack button for now, and just go straight into the skills button. I'll explain why in a second. So in the skills, each unit has its own 2 skills, and as you can see if we hover over them, it tells us which each skill does, what its power is, what its range is, and area of effect. This is something that I found quite interesting to implement, because a lot of the tactical nature of RPGs is choosing which ranged attacks to use over, say if you had a tank in the front lines and you have an archer behind, then the archer will be able to hit units in front of the tank, and be able to create that dynamic in this sort of environment was my goal. So some units, as you can see, have area of effect. Units with a range of skills with a range of 0 are skills that affect the player themselves and units around them, or skills with other ranges of more than 0 will affect enemies of up to that many units away. So as you can see, the red tiles that are created when I click on that skill show what area that skill will affect. So if we choose this stalwart one, we can see the purple tiles show the area of effect around the selected tile that will affect. So with the basic attacks, I use the same template as I use for the skills. However, it's essentially a much weaker version of what the skills are. So it can only attack 1 square away, it hasn't got any area of effect, and it's got quite mediocre damage, but it does have its upsides, which I will go into in a second. So if we try and find a bit of combat here, then I will show you why the basic attack can be useful in some situations. So, due to issues with the scenery and building the scenery, I decided to add the ability to rotate the camera with the middle mouse button. So, doing this allows the player to have a much better view of the area than they would have originally if I'd have kept the camera static, but also allows me to still keep this isometric style camera angle, which I feel is good for showing off the assets in the scene. So this is another thing that came up a fair bit in feedback, criticism technically, from the demo or die sessions, and is something that I will be working on further, to implement systems such as making walls invisible when you can't, when you're looking straight at them, stopping you from selecting something directly behind walls to stop you from accidentally selecting something that you didn't need to click on, those sorts of things. And as you just saw there is a bit of an error when moving the camera that I haven't been able to fix, which is essentially the camera rotates itself back to its original rotation, which is 0, but it rotates around an object as it's also trying to move, so that causes it to essentially teleport to the top left, to the top right of the screen, and have to travel back over. So whilst you're trying to find a bit of So as we can see here, the pounce skill, which has a small range, wouldn't be able to affect, but the swift strike skill, which has a much larger range, would be able to hit the unit in this case. So when using skills, every skill has its own recoil dependent on how powerful that individual skill is. So because swift strike can be quite a powerful skill if used quite frequently, it's got a fair recoil. As you can see, the 25 damage dealt to myself well, dealt to the unit that used it, in this case the wolf. So if we go here and use another skill, Arm Breaker, that does a lot of damage but has less recoil because that unit is much more focused on attack, whereas the wolf has a lot lower defense and is focused on speed. This shows once again the random generation of the units, which brings this more tactical style of play into view, by showing that some units, such as wolves, will die if they are left on the front line. So you have to place your units accordingly and use what units you have to your advantage, and try and take advantage of units that the opponents don't have too many of. So another thing that is done in the attack system is a turn delay system. So it may look as if it's just randomly choosing which unit goes next, but each character has its own turn delay value, essentially based off their speed. So as you can see, the wolves are very fast, which is also something that does need nerfing. So they get quite a lot of turns. And slower units don't get turns as often. Different attacks or different options during your turn, such as attacking, defending, moving, or using a skill, increases your turn delay value by a fair bit, whereas ending the turn just increases it by a small bit, making your turn come around much faster. So each skill, depending on the power of the skill, will have a corresponding turn delay, and it will make your turn come around much slower than using a basic attack, which is something else that the basic attacks are better at. The other thing with the UI is the move button. That's the one we haven't covered yet. So when each class has their own amount of spaces that it can move, and in this case this character can only move 3 squares, so it creates a 3x3 grid around him using a Dijkstra's algorithm. Now this is quite computationally expensive, but as I said at the beginning, because this is a turn-based RPG, we can get away with computationally expensive things for what would be considered something trivial. This isn't necessarily a good practice, but it allows me to very easily navigate the map and avoid obstacles, even with the dynamically generated terrain and moving objects in the scene, such as different units in the scene. So after you've moved, there is a cancel move option available, which will return you to your original position. Once again, this does reset the camera and cause that camera issue, but it will return you to your original position and rotation. And rotation is something that I consider quite important because, a la Stellar Glow, the game I took inspiration from making this, rotation does have an effect on how much damage you deal. If you attack an enemy from behind, you'll deal much more damage than if you attack them from the front. And certain units can have skills that will cause critical damage if attacked from behind, for example. So this was a feature that I was planning on implementing, but is something that was out of scope given the time period that I had to create this game mechanic. So, as you can see, when the camera is moving or when the turn's over, I just dynamically hide the UI just to make sure that the player can't select anything. As an issue that came up in previous versions of the game is that when the player selected something whilst the camera was transitioning, it will cause the camera to seriously bug out, or allow the player to do things that could essentially break the game. So next is the status effects. So as you can see with these two units up here, they've got little icons above their health bars. So these, well, there are two different types of status effects, essentially. The standard status effects are instantly activated, last for a set number of turns, and affect the character's stats. there are only two of these. It's attack up and attack modifier and a defense modifier, which is positive or negative. As we can see, this one over here has a red cross on it, so that's a negative stat modifier, meaning that the wolf's attack has been reduced. The other one, the HP with the little down arrow, that is a continuous effect debuff. So this sort of debuff would be used for things such as paralysis or poison. The HP down is essentially a poison/bleed effect. That also allows me to have a HP up effect, which is the opposite, which would be health regeneration every turn. Now these proc at the start of every turn. The HP down effect, for example, dealing damage, or the HP up effect causing their target to heal every turn. They also have a certain amount of turns that they can last for before they delete themselves, and the health script essentially just checks through what keeps a list of status conditions that are currently affecting the target, and loops through them at the beginning of the turn, just essentially running the effect of each. I've made it so that you can't stack any buffs or debuffs apart from the HP down effect, which is one of the reasons that the wolf is quite powerful. If you attack an enemy multiple times using the Swift Strike ability and get them to have the HP down effect multiple times, then it can cause them to lose a lot of HP at turns start. So the amount of HP lost and gained, both from magic from the mages, which would be the snake characters, on the blue team, which we do have one over here, they have skills that can heal teammates around them, and the red team mages have a skill that allows them to heal a character over time, applying, as I said, that HP up buff. So all of that is done based on percentages, using a different using a different method called an overwritten method for the take damage method in the player health script, which basically allows them to bypass all of the stats of a character and just heal a direct percentage of that character's health. So, next up. Next up is the map design. So when I created this map, I tried to create it in a way that would allow me to showcase off the skills and abilities of each character. So for example, the mages, which have a very long range of attack, have quite a good area here, or here, to attack enemies from. The tanks, which are very good in choke points, have options here and here to shine, and the wolves, which will be able to attack from from behind a tank, have a good opportunity to hide in these choke points. So I also tried to create little back routes that you could use to flank the opponent, and small protected areas where you'd be able to very easily protect fragile units such as mages, making it difficult to attack them with any other unit other than another mage. So by trying to create the map in this sort of way, and by being limited by the scope of the project to having a small map, it made the actual design very difficult, and it's something that people have brought up quite frequently as an issue, is the choke points and the pace of the game, because the 3 of the 4 units that you can possibly get are very close ranged, the wolf being the exception, having skills that allow you to attack at range. Because of this, people have said that the game is it can slow down considerably when units are clustered around this area, around the fountain, which is something that I would consider countering by having a larger map, or by increasing the map size to include these tiles here, which would allow me to create a wider area for people to go through, hopefully avoiding the choke point problem. So, thanks to the way that I've developed the tile generation system and the movement using the A-star and Dijkstra's algorithms, it would be quite easy for me to build up other maps, other scenes from either these assets or any other assets that I choose, and essentially create a map that builds itself, essentially, just by adding colliders to all of the game objects, making sure that they're tagged correctly. The scene will build itself around whatever objects I decide to put in, making development of things such as future maps much easier. So that is all I really have to talk about for now, and I hope that this has shed some light on how my game mechanic works and the steps and design choices that I took whilst developing the game mechanic itself. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.